Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
The following is independently produced programming. The views and opinions expressed are those of the producers and do not reflect the views and opinions of Falls Area Community Television, our staff, or board of directors.
Secrets in the shadows, lost and found. Truth in every echo, loud and clear. Keep on with the long road, no more fear. In the halls of power, whispers grow. Every secret got beneath the undertone. Honor stories hidden in the dust. On this long road, in the truth we trust.
Good evening, or good afternoon. Hello, I'm a little stumbling along this morning. Sorry about that. Hello, this is Chris Roberts. I'm your host of the Long Road. And our first topic of the day will be fat generals. That's one of the current event type topics that is going around. The Secretary of Defense, he had this meeting with mostly all his generals, and there's a picture right here, and I know you can't see it, but in this picture, every single seat is taken by a general or an admiral. Okay, yeah, one of the first things you may notice, there's a lot of balding men here. But also, you may notice that a bunch of them are not really in the best of shape. So the secretary dresses down the generals and says, hey, I do not want to see any fat generals. I don't want to see unfit generals. And I'm sick and tired of seeing fat generals and admirals walking the halls of the Pentagon. Okay? But is the fat generals the problem? Is the fat admirals the problem? You know, many of the fat generals and fat admirals, they're not leaders. They're not out in the field. They're not going off the war unless they're on a staff position. So they can get credit being in a war zone, but they have little to no day-to-day responsibility over combat troops. A lot of the generals and admirals in the Pentagon are just staff workers. They've got their little assignment and little group. That's all they have. They don't have to worry about too many people. They got colonels and Navy captains and lieutenant colonels and stuff like that working for them, senior staff NCOs. So, are we making a really big deal out of fat generals? Well, yeah. It's not a big deal. It's an important deal. Because generals and admirals should be setting the example. So if I'm a fat general or I'm a fat admiral, what kind of example do I set for junior officers? If I'm a fat general or a fat admiral, then I would have no problem having fat officers working for me. Fat staff NCOs and senior NCOs and Navy chiefs working for me. Okay? But here's one for you. The hypocrisy of an overweight or a fat senior official when they sign off on young men and women discharge under general conditions because that individual is overweight or that individual has failed the physical fitness test. That is one of the heights of hypocrisy. You're saying, hey, you know what? You're too fat to be in the service. You're out and you didn't really serve completely honorable, so we're just going to give you a general discharge. And you go, oh yeah, general discharge under honorable conditions. But that's not the same as an honorable discharge. Hey, if you own a house and you want to get a tax credit, you better have an honorable discharge, not a general discharge. So I went and looked it up. One of these reports says more than 2/3 of reserve troops and National Guard are overweight. 68% of people in the Army Reserves, Air Force Reserve, Navy Reserves, Air National Guard, and National Guard are overweight. So, in the National Guard and the Reserves, being underweight is an exception. And so, well, anybody who has Facebook or some of these other media outlets would have seen the picture of these National Guard guys getting off a vehicle. The guy in the front who didn't know how to carry his weapon correctly was morbidly obese. The other two guys, one on each side of him, fit the guidelines of being obese. The Hill, Secretary Trout's push to replace heavy-set National Guard troops in Illinois. So here it is, the land of Texas, the governor of Texas sending 200 National Guard people to Illinois, fully aware that quite a few of them did not meet the height and weight standards, far exceeding them, and quite possibly a number of them did not meet the physical fitness standards, but they were there. And you can ask, well, some of the senior staff NCOs and some of the officers are quite heavy. You know, when you have a national disaster like a hurricane or whatever, you look behind them, you see the officers standing behind the general as props, and they're a little heavyweight too. And so it wasn't even a consideration of them. They had no problem with sending these overweight, unfit National Guard men that they knew they were going to be having photographs of them to Illinois. Okay, then you go 21% of the Army National Guard members. Past studies show the highest weight problems are among the Army National Guard members, with 21% 1 out of every 5 members in the Army National Guard are obese. And so the men coming off from the Texas National Guard, hey, they wouldn't be, them being obese was pretty acceptable. And you go, why would any service allow 21% of the people to be obese? Well, states get money for having slots filled. It is not in the National Guard's financial interest. 21% of our guys are obese, so they meet the requirement to be expelled from the service, but that means we're not getting federal money for those ones. Also means when you got codes 1, 2, 3, and 4, active duty units are expected to be 1. Really good reserve units, National Guard units should be up in 2. You don't want to be 3 and 4. And so what happens is you can go, well, you know, Smitty over here, yeah, I know he's overweight. And he can't pass the PFT, but we'll give him a profile so he doesn't have to do a bunch of stuff. But he also has a critical job. We need him. Because if we don't have a number of people in the right MOS and the right training, we are not deployable as a unit. And that's quite an embarrassment to a state, the state adjutant general, and the governor to go and say, well, sorry, we can't deploy because we don't have enough qualified people. Okay, right here. All our generals belong on a diet of rice and beans. And we go in and says, the vice president goes and says, all people put down beardo generals. I don't know of any general or admiral that has a beard. And so the president and secretary of war are complaining about fat generals and fat admirals. But you know, the commander-in-chief has a few extra pounds. You sit there. There's another one that says, fat generals. One out of 4 individuals, 18 to 25, are too fat to join the military. So the military takes in people overweight, and then they train them, and then they don't want to get rid of them. And so you sit there Now we're complaining about how do we get these individuals to make weight. Well, let's look from the Center of Disease Control. They put out a study saying how fat people, which I'll probably get in trouble for body shaming, but we're talking right here from the Center of Disease Control. When it comes to the military, totally different. You can body shame all you want. You're either fit, you meet the height and weight standards, and you're physically fit. And so, plain and simple. Like, for example, in the Marine Corps, when I was a second lieutenant, it was my responsibility to do the PFT failures. 6 o'clock every morning, they were out at the track and we were working and they had to do a PFT. Then at lunch, they had to come and do a PFT. And after work, they had to come and do a PFT. This went on and on until they were able to pass 2 consecutive PFTs. Then they were taken off the program. They had 3 months to do it. And if later in the future they failed the PFT and they did not get back to passing within the second 3 months, they were discharged. Same thing if you were a fat body. Plain and simple, you're overweight. The Marine Corps calls you a fat body. You got to get up in the morning and go run. You're in there structured. Then noontime, you got to do it. And supper time, you got to do it. And basically, every time you tried to put something that has a lot of calories in your mouth, there was going to be someone, an NCO or staff NCO, that may grab it and throw it out because you were going to be limited to about 1,200 calories a day until you get it done. And when you go in, when you're going through 3 cycles of exercise a day, and you're only getting 1,200 calories and you might be working up 5,000 calories of work, you're going to lose the weight pretty quickly. And the other thing is, if you get up in the morning, a fat body or a PFT failure, you're training in the morning, and then you go back to your unit and you do the normal PT stuff. So these 3 are over and above. Okay. 1 in 5 children, 20% of kids are obese. 40% of adults are obese. Oh, the numbers have been changed. Of the young adults 17 to 24, 33 to 34% are too fat to join the military. Among the 67% of 17 to 24-year-olds that meet the height and weight standards to join the military, only 75% of them have been active enough and physically fit to meet the demands of a boot camp. Consequently, only 40% of 17 to 24 young adults are weight and relatively active would qualify to go into the military if they choose. The Lieutenant General Hurling, the military has experienced increased difficulty in recruiting soldiers as a result of physical inactivity, obesity, malnutrition among our nation's youth. %19 of active duty service members were obese in 2020, up from 16% in 2015. So, 1 out of 5 active duty people are obese. Well, obese people are non-deployable. So that means they get to stay home with their loved ones while people in really good shape get deployed, go to combat zones, things like that. Wow, that's really motivating. How do obese people get fat? And a lot of the obese enlisted are in the higher ranks. Yes, there's some in the like E2, E3. Hey, in the Army, there's guys who will, and women that will graduate out of boot camp obese because you had to look the other way to keep the numbers. And so if I'm a recruiter and I have to recruit, my section over here has to recruit 50 people a month, I'm going to let a number of people who are overweight slip by, justifying to myself that they'll lose the weight in boot camp. So I'm the battalion commander in boot camp, and I know I have to pass at least 80% of all recruits. Well, what happens if I have to 10% of those people to get up to 80 are overweight? Well, I'll convince myself that when they get to a unit, that will be taken care of, they would lose. I was just doing a claim, going through this individual's record. He was in a front line tactical unit, and I'm going, holy crap. This individual waistline went up to 55. This individual's weight went up to 268. And it was really funny. He came in the military at 69 and a half. But when his weight was going up and down, and all of a sudden he grew an inch and a half, Then all of a sudden he grew to 72 inches. And when he kept growing, that caused the percentage of his weight to go down. And then when they finally said enough is enough, when they had the limit at 20, this individual was 33 plus. Okay? This went over a period of 3 years. So that means to me that some of his senior NCOs, even some of his company grade officers and some of the field grade officers were overweight. They didn't want to look themselves in the mirror, so they kept trying to, we don't have to do anything, we don't have to do anything. So what I can say with these individuals, they were not being hypocrites. They were not signing off and saying, bingo, you're out because you're obese. New guy comes in, takes over. All of a sudden, the individual gets a new exam and everything. He's back down to his 69.5 inches, and he's sent out the door. The 19% obese, these individuals are a lot less likely to be medically ready to deploy. Between 2008 and 2017, active duty soldiers had more than 3.6 million musculoskeletal injuries. 3.6. You go, well, yeah, that is kind of a lot. But those injuries could result in VA compensation for the rest of their lives after they get out. One study found that active duty soldiers who were obese were 30% more likely to get this type of injury. So, if you're 6'1", 172 pounds, which in really good shape, your chances of getting injured are pretty slim. Yes, you can stumble and trip. You might pull a muscle, but normally you're not going to have too many problems. Now, if you're 6'1", say 232, you have at least a 33% greater chance of getting a musculoskeletal. Oh, my lower back pain. Oh, I'm developing flat feet. I'm getting plantar fasciitis. I'm getting tendinitis in my Achilles tendon. My knees are wearing down. So those type of injuries add billions of dollars to what the VA has to pay when the individuals get out. The Department of Defense, our nation's largest employer, spends $1.5 billion a year in obesity-related healthcare costs. $1.5 billion extra to a year to take obesity-related healthcare costs. Hey, you know, if I'm an E7, 20 years, I'm 20 pounds overweight, I'm a captain or general or an admiral, talking about Navy captain, colonel, I'm 20, 25 pounds overweight. Hey, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart attacks, things like that. Lost work days to overweight and obesity for active duty personnel members is over 658,000 man days a year. Just think of that. 658,000 days a year that people are on light or no duty that doesn't allow them to go to work. And there's other people, more days lost because they're on light duty and may have to do some other job but can't do the job they're trained for. Just think of that. 658,000 days a year. You know how many man days a year we work? About 260. Then you go in and take away holidays and vacations and stuff. And let's see one thing. I should have done this before. We're going, come on. If we go 658,000 divided by 260, to make up that number is I would only have to work 2,530 years to come up with that amount of man days. So that comes out to over 20, it's almost the equivalent of over 2,500 active duty service members not working for a whole year. Just think, having to pay 2,500 people for a full year's pay without them working. We as the American taxpayers have to do that. So that's a lot of money. And again, and also physical activity is associated with costly basic training discharge. In basic training, like what we're saying is like, I'm a recruiter and I know that, some of these guys are fat, but I gotta make quota, so I'll send them. Do some of the fat people go in and lose the weight in boot camp and get physically active? Yes, but quite a few do not make it out of boot camp because when they have to get physically active and they're overweight, they get hurt and have to be discharged. And some of them will be discharged with service-connected injuries. Some of them will get severance pay and get a small amount. Others will be discharged and they'll go to the VA and collect money. And so it just isn't like it was. So what is the service going to do? Well, for me, the Secretary of Defense is doing the correct thing. He knows he has a critical problem with 19% of active duty being obese, which makes them non-deployable, and 21% of National Guard members, Army National Guard members are obese, and almost 70% of reserves and National Guard are overweight and obese. He has a serious problem. How is he going to fight another war? He right now is looking at it and saying, we don't have the bodies, the physically fit bodies to go to war. And let's look at the last wars. Okay, when we look at 1.5 million people on active duty, and you know, we get all the ones with National Guard and reserves and everything. And you have 100,000 people in Afghanistan or Iraq. Why did some of the people have to deploy 2, 3, 4, or 5 times into a combat zone while you got 1 million don't even show up? They get to stay home. They get to be with their family. They get to go to movies. They get to go to McDonald's. And the same ones are getting, or, you know, like the Marine Corps, people enlisting for 3 years, coming in for their 3 years, serve 2 tours, and they leave. Look, and so when I say 1.5 million, over say a 20-year period, look at how many people came in for 3 and 4 years and went over there. While the fat people didn't have to go. So just think of it. What is the chances that some of the people knew they were going to have to go and said, you know what, I'm stuffing my face because I don't want to deploy to a war zone? Hey, no one's going to call me a coward or anything. They're just going to say, I'm not physically fit for worldwide deployment. And I know they're not going to throw me out. And I know I'm still going to get promoted. So, like I said, I don't agree with a lot of stuff that the Secretary of Defense says, but the Secretary of Defense is right on here. Getting rid of the fat has to start at the top. If you go and say, I got 800 generals, and you go and look and say, wow, I got 87 fat generals and admirals. And I say, hey, this is it, buddy, ma'am. if you're overweight, you better be putting in your retirement papers out, I'm getting rid of you myself, because you serve as the pleasure of the President of the United States. And bingo, this guy over here is fat. And if you can't pass the physical fitness test twice a year, you're out of here. That sends a strong signal to captains, Navy captains, and other services, colonels and lieutenant colonels and commanders. Hey, we're going back to the old days. If you're fat, you're not getting promoted. Plain and simple. If you stay fat for 6 months and you're still fat, you're getting discharged. Regardless of your rank, bingo. That way, the people making the decisions will not become hypocrites. If they know they have to meet the standard, they're going to require their troops to meet the same standard. Otherwise, if I'm a battalion commander and I got fat troops out there, and the regimental commander comes and inspects my unit, and he asks me, why do I have fat troops out there? I better be able to say, sir, every single one of them are in the fat body program, and a few of them are being processed for discharge because they have failed to achieve the proper weight loss within the 6-month period. Plain and simple. That is how you're going to shape down the size by getting rid of them. Or maybe the Secretary of Defense has an alternative motive. Maybe he says, you know what? We got to reduce the armed forces for maybe 100,000 troops. Okay? So if I don't want to tick anybody off, hey, all I have to say is all the people who are overweight and all the people who can't pass the PFT, physical fitness tests, are out of here. And so that could quite happen. Let me see right here, which one? Now, the biggest thing that's going on right now is the federal shutdown. And you go, how much is the federal shutdown affecting people? Well, I can go and say, well, I got my retirement check, and then I got my Social Security check last week. I'm still going, I still got all my VA medical appointments Friday. So I still get my mail. So it really hasn't been affecting me at all. And so for a lot of people, it isn't affecting them. Okay, today is day 15. They're still arguing, is the Speaker of the House going to bring the House back together? And we've got the media going back and forth saying, hey, this is all the Republicans' fault. Then the other part's going saying it's all the Democrats' fault. You know, the Democrats, all we want to do, the Republicans say, we just want a clean bill to bring us into November. Well, but a clean bill that brings us into November creates the same problem. The Democrats saying, hey, we want funding for basically Obamacare. And if you don't get the funding, we're not going. President Trump directed the Secretary of Defense to move money around to pay the troops. Will there be enough money to pay the troops on the 30th? I'm pretty sure the President of the United States is going to find ways to do that. Okay? Well, the President of the United States says he's going to eliminate a lot of jobs, and he's going to eliminate jobs in Democratic areas. He's also canceled a number of projects. He goes to New York. Hey, New York, you're expecting us billions and billions of dollars in grants. We're not doing that. And so what he wants is to punish Democrat cities to ensure, to get more and more pressure that so the Democrats will fold. The Speaker of the House doesn't want to swear in the newly elected Democratic representative from Arizona because if he swears her in, she said she's already going to go and vote for the man to get all the Epstein files. She would be the 218th signature, and that would put it over. So there's a bunch of things that are going on in this shutdown, and I think the biggest thing in the shutdown is the individual, the director of the Office Management and Budget. He's using this as an opportunity to reduce the federal workforce. The IRS has laid off a lot of people, so your possibility of getting contact with the IRS is slim. There's a number of IRS scams going on right now. IRS does not send you any emails or text messages, so don't take those. And so, looking at it, it just that Johnson said he was going to bring people back yesterday, but it doesn't seem like it's going. And as the time is going by, we're getting closer and closer to another recess in Congress. President Trump has used tariff money to make sure the WIC program for women and infants is continued. And so the other part is tariffs. President Trump has thrown on a couple of new 100% tariffs on China because China says, nope, we're not supplying any rare elements, which is needed for a lot of equipment to do things, computers. So the president gets upset and tells China, sorry, we're not going to, you're going to have to pay 100% tariff on everything you sell us. Then China goes back and says, you know what? Any ships that were built or owned by this company in South Korea, and South Korea is one of the biggest shipbuilders in the world, will not be allowed to come into Chinese ports or transfer Chinese goods. So going back and forth, the president saying, well, the Secretary of Treasury saying, hey, the only people who are going to get hurt are the Chinese. Well, China today is quite different than China 30, 40 years ago. Okay. China has about 1.3 billion people. China has been working over the years to create its own economy. For years, China just produced stuff for us to buy. You know, here China produced some cheap stuff so you can go to Dollar Tree, the dollar store, you can go to Walmart, you know. Stuff that was sent to China was to eliminate jobs in the United States to increase profits for our American companies. Well, with these big tariff increases, we're going to pay. China doesn't have to ship us anything. China has a population that it can sell a lot of its goods to. Or, as China learned during COVID, it can produce a lot of stuff and leave it sitting there. Or another thing China can do because of the tariffs and things, saying, hey, we're not using the American dollar. We're using our special money that we're creating under BRIC. So China plays the long game. Mr. Trump plays the day game. Mr. Trump, who has a long history of failed businesses, excuse me, is working against a nation that thinks long term. And so we're at risk. Okay, the president says tariffs are good for the United States. Tariffs will bring jobs back to the United States. Well, you got companies. Apple says, yeah, we're going to build this in the United States. Apple knows, Tim Cook goes, well, time we buy the land, time we get it, come up with design and all that stuff, time we get all the permits, and time we get ready to go out to bid, Trump will be a former president. Bingo, change your mind. Everything Trump wants takes years to even initiate. So they're placating him and telling him he wants to hear, so they get tariffs on their products. iPhones are expensive enough not to get tariffs on. But is tariffs working the way Trump says? Well, it's working in a way, but we're not bringing trillions of dollars in. We're not even bringing billions of dollars in under the tariff. We're bringing a lot of money in under the tariffs, much more than we did in the past. And it's going up right now. We brought in $504 billion. $504 billion that we brought in on tariffs. And what has that tariff been doing? Actually, the tariff has been reducing the budget deficit for this year. The projected budget deficit for this year was about $2.1 trillion. Now it's under $1.9 trillion. So the tariffs has wiped off about $200 billion of our deficit this year. So because we have less of a deficit, the increase in interest costs is falling. So yes, so you could say the tariffs have been working for the numbers for the Treasury Department. It isn't keeping the national debt from going up, which is at almost $37.9 trillion and should be over $38 trillion by Thanksgiving. So the shutdown is going to cost, and the shutdown is going to have a negative effect on the economy in a lot of major cities like in Northern Virginia or DC. And the tariffs, $500 billion is going to come out of our pocketbook. As we've all been seeing, prices are going higher. They got no choice. And China hasn't bought a single American soybean in the last 4 months. And now President Trump says China will not be able to sell cooking oil to us.